for it, go for it. I'm just saying I'm not finished yet. Search for it, swing for it. Discover the me that lives in yes. Stand for it, stretch for it. It's my time, imagine my best. Run for it, reach for it. Uncover the me that lives in yes. I know, yes I know, there'll be miracles wherever I go. It's not work, it's play. I can make magic today.
Hi everyone, welcome to Senior Nation. I'm your host, Phyllis Ayman, and you are listening to the Source TV Radio Network, WTSN, Washington, D.C. We are indeed a senior nation with 100 plus million adults over the age of 50, and we are here to bring you up-to-date information about successful aging, healthful longevity, and becoming what I call a well-ager. To dignity, respect, quality of life, and quality of care for our parents, our grandparents, and loved ones. We at Senior Nation will be your trusted voice for informed choices, meaningful conversations, and a vibrant life at every age. Though the Source TV Radio Network is known for its dedication to bringing the highest level of jazz content to the viewing and listening audience, the owners of the network are also dedicated to bringing this important content to this fast-growing demographic, and I'm always grateful for the opportunity. And now I want to introduce tonight's guests, who I had the pleasure of meeting the past few days at the Leading Age Conference in Boston, Massachusetts. It was truly enlightening to hear them speak, and I'm so glad that they can join me this evening. So, firstly, Dr. Sara Zeff Geber holds a PhD and is an author and keynote speaker. Over the past 10 years, Sara has developed a niche specialty talking about the challenges of solo agers, people who have no children or who are aging alone with no support from nearby family. She believes solo agers have unique needs in later life that warrant greater foresight and a more robust approach to planning. A sought-after speaker at conferences on retirement and aging, Sara is active in the Retirement Coaches Association, the American Society on Aging, the Sonoma County Section on Aging, and the Life Planning Network. And for my other guests, Dr. J. Zigmont, who also holds a PhD and MBA and is a certified financial planner, among his other accomplishments as a TEDx speaker, cultural economist, and the leading expert on the child-free economy, the multi-trillion-dollar economic and social shift driven by 25% of Americans without children. He's the founder of Child Free Wealth and Child Free Trust. So here we are with Sara and with Jay. Hi, both of you.
Hi.
So glad to see you. So, we were talking a little bit before we started, and I think it was only fair to tell the viewing and listening audience that you guys have spent the last few days, 12-hour days at this amazing conference, speaking, meeting people, networking, educating people. I heard you both speak. It was fantastic. You are probably more exhausted than I am. So for the viewing and listening audience, if the energy level is a little down, I hope they understand, but I'm suggesting that they stay with us because the information is going to be fantastic. So, first of all, let's talk a little bit about what Leading Age is. You could both weigh in on that because I'm interested for the viewing and listening audience to hear what drew you to that conference. So
I can start on that. Leading Age is really a trade association for the senior living communities around the country, but almost exclusively for the nonprofit senior living communities. So this is where people who work in and or lead or own senior living communities come together to share best practices, to share questions and answers, and to talk to one another and get, kind of, I don't know, it's like a filling station, fill their energy supply up for the rest of the year. It's just a great opportunity for people to meet others who do what they do and serve the wonderful population of older adults in our country.
I love that metaphor. It's like a filling station. I like that. What about you, Jay?
And I'll continue the metaphor and say, hey, I like that you get a chance to look under the hood and see what people are doing. Because I think one of the things we often see is in the news, they talk about all the challenges going on. And there are a lot of challenges in the system. And sometimes you feel like the system is broken. But what you see when you look under the hood is you see these people with these huge hearts, just putting everything they've got into helping seniors and the aging population. I mean, that to me is probably what fills my tank.
You just made a point that really resonated with me, because I come from this experience of working in the mostly for-profit world of long-term care and skilled nursing. And I'm not saying that people don't care, that people working there don't care, but because I've had so much experience with the people, above the people that are working there, that have a different agenda, so it seems, rather than a caring agenda, I lose sight of that sometimes. So I'm so glad you said that, because I really didn't think about it in that way. And you just reframed my whole thinking about it. So, that's really great. I'm so glad that we started off with that. So, Sara, you want to explain how you came to this? I heard you say it at your talk, how you came to this idea about solo aging and what it means for, people listening or viewing, or, people they know.
Sure. This happened to me probably 12, 13 years ago. I watched a lot of my contemporaries taking care of their aging parents. And I lost my parents when I was much, much younger, so I didn't think about that. But all of a sudden, a lot of my friends were spending a tremendous amount of time traveling back and forth across the country, taking time off work, in one case, taking a whole leave of absence from work to manage the care and housing of their aging parents. And I watched this go on for quite a while, and I was out having a glass of wine with a friend of mine one evening, and neither she or I have children. And she was reflecting on all that she had been doing for her mom, who was about 89 or 90 at the time. And I said, Sandy, you and I don't have kids. Who's going to do all that for us? And that was really the question that got me started on the trajectory that I've been on now for about 12 years. So it was a big aha for me.
Yeah, that is, and as you're telling that story, my daughter lives about 45, 50 minutes from me. And of course I shouldn't say of course, she has her own family, but my son lives on the other side of the country. And so, interestingly enough, they've had this conversation in the past, not so much recently, where she'd say, it's all going to be on me because you're going to be over there and you're not coming back and running back and forth and doing all of this. And, that's a whole other conversation. But as you're saying that, if it wasn't for her, I'd be in that situation, because it's not only people who don't have children, because and I want to get to how Jay got to this, but you told an interesting story at your talk about this person. I think it was was it a couple or a woman whose children lived in Denmark? I think it was.
Oh, correct? My neighbor.
Your
Yeah,
neighbor.
I have a neighbor couple who live a couple blocks from my husband and me, and we see a lot of them because we don't have kids and they don't have kids for the in, at least in the immediate area. They have one son who fell in love with a Danish woman, and they of course now live in Copenhagen near her parents raising their kids. So
Hmm.
their only son is halfway around the world. And I let people self-select in terms of solo aging, but I look at them as being solo agers in many respects. It's not that they don't love their son and he doesn't love them,
Right.
but in an emergency, he's not going to get on the next plane from Copenhagen. He has a family there.
Right,
So
right, right.
anyway, it's just one example of millions.
Yeah, but it's, food for thought. And so, Jay, so extending that to what you're doing, this child-free trust, you want to talk about what that is a little bit from the financial aspect of it, how one informs the other, I should say.
Yeah, so it's funny. Sarah and I were chatting after one of the events, and she was telling her origin story. We'll go that way, and she's like, "The question was like, who's going to do this for me?" And that's the answer that's what we're answering at Child Free Trust. We are essentially the next of kin for child free people who don't have it. So we're
Oh,
their medical power attorney, financial power attorney, executor, trustee. We help them create all their documents, care documents. When they go in the hospital, we not only make the medical decisions for them, but we call their pet sitter to make sure their dog's taken care of. Because you don't realize how much of the system is built around the assumption that you will have kids there to take care of you. And if you don't, for whatever reason, the system breaks.
huh. It's interesting that you're saying that because I was just talking to my daughter earlier because I have a doctor told me the other day I need a hip replacement. I'm not quite keen on really jumping into that yet, but nevertheless, and so I was saying it to her, gee, I don't know how I'm going to, I have steps in my house. I wouldn't be able to drive. She's 45, 50 minutes from me. She has her own family. And I'm certainly not going into a skilled nursing short-term rehab. I mean, I've just been in that business too much and I just can't see myself doing that. And, she said, well, gee, she kind of stopped for a second. So, I'm thinking about all this as we're talking about this. And then she said, well, I guess you could come stay here for a few days until you're ready. We could figure it out. But it was interesting that pause, made me think about this conversation we were going to have this evening, because I mean, that's great that she said that, but suppose that wasn't the case. So it was just a perfect conversation for this conversation this evening. So, how do you approach this, Sarah? Do people come to you, or do you, I know you do speaking in, around the country and at various events, but how do you work with individuals? Do you work with couples? I mean, do you do coaching? I mean, how do you work with people or get them aware of what their needs are as a solo ager?
Well, after my book came out, I stopped doing one-on-one coaching. I just wasn't reaching a large enough audience, and I was the only one out there beating this particular drum at that time. And I just went essentially on the speaking circuit to bring the information to a wider number of people. And when people do, of course, contact me and say, I need some help, I need some coaching. And I have people that I refer them to, both in the area where I live in California and around the country, because a lot of coaching now, probably most coaching now, is done online.
Right.
So I do make a lot of referrals on that, but my mission in life is to get the word out about solo aging to as wide an audience as I can. And as I like to say to people, if you aren't a solo ager yourself, I know you know one.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's one in your
Absolutely.
family.
Absolutely.
So, and that of course, Jay has a little bit different population that he's talking to. Some solo agers are child free, not all, because I have kind of a wider definition of that. So,
Right.
yeah.
So the title of the book, and I believe we have a graphic of the book, if we could bring it up. I know we had a little glitch earlier about whether we had the graphic, but if we could bring it up, the title of the book is Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Agers. And I hope we'll be able to bring it up, but until we see if we can, there it is. It popped up right there. And where could people get this book if they wanted to,
Pretty much
available?
anywhere. All of the online booksellers have it. It's in Audible form. You can order it from the publisher, but usually you pay less if you're just going to order it from Amazon or Apple or one of the booksellers. Yeah, so just about anywhere you buy books. In fact, if you prefer to get books through your library or through an independent bookstore, they can order it.
Oh, cool. That's really great. Yeah, so Essential Retirement Planning for Solo Agers. When did the book come out, may I ask?
2018.
Oh, okay. So that's, certainly recent enough. The information is
It's pretty evergreen.
yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, it's kind of evergreen. So that's great. So now, Jay, how do you go about, or how do people go about finding you, and how do you go about working with them? And you kind of described what you do, but how would they initiate that conversation, or how would they find you? And then I know you have a book, and we'd like to bring the graphic of that book up as well, so people can look for it. If they'd like.
Yeah, our website is a Child Free Trust. We are working directly one-on-one with clients. We also have Child Free Wealth, which is a financial planning firm specifically to serve child-free people. Because Sarah's right. We're both out, hitting the streets, talking and trying to get the message out. But then you also have to figure out how to help people one-on-one, and that's hard. There are millions of people, that are child-free or solo agers, whichever group you want to look at it, that need help. And it some mornings when I wake up, it's pretty daunting to think about. Sarah, I don't know what number you use, but I say there's about 15 million child-free folks over the age of 55 in the United States. And I say about because there's not a great measure of it. Like it's hard to find, but they have to have a plan that fits them. The challenge is if you do a standard estate plan, your standard financial plan, all of those assume you have next of kin.
Right.
All of those assume you either do have kids or will have kids.
Right.
And you might be getting bad advice. And the problem is for child-free people, if you don't have your estate paperwork done, because people are like, oh, I don't have a big estate, I don't have to have all that. I'm like, look, if you get hit by that bus, somebody's got to make decisions for you.
Right.
And if you have a power of attorney in place, that's where you get in that guardianship or conservatorship with the courts. And nobody wants that.
Right. So yeah, so it's child-free.
It's a child-free guide to life and money. That image does not look great.
No, it does not. But okay, things happen. But okay, and however it came up, a child-free guide for life and money. And people can get it, I'm sure, as with Sarah's book, on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, online platforms, I assume.
Yep.
Okay, great. So Sarah, I wanted to go back and ask you a question. When you talked about you used to do one-on-one coaching. So what did that look like?
The one-on-one coaching?
Yeah.
Well, when I did one-on-one coaching was really kind of before I delved into the solo aging vat. So I was really doing retirement coaching, helping people figure out what they wanted to do, how they were going to have a life with meaning and purpose and not just sit around watching TV. So I was really devoted to that for several years before I started doing the solo ager talks and writing. Right. Essentially, I write and talk about solo aging.
Right.
And so once I did that, once I made the switch, I really didn't do any more one-on-one coaching. But, honestly, coaching a solo ager or someone who's child-free involves the same kind of skills as coaching anyone.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a lot of listening. Everybody is different. So it's not a one-size-fits-all mantle for either population.
You know what they say? I was at a talk earlier today about dementia. And you know what they say? When you meet one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia. And it's the same as what you're saying. Everybody has, their own story, their own desires, goals, whatever. I love that you have a chapter, you have a section, a chapter in your book that's, self-awareness, meaning, and purpose. And, I think it's so important for people as they advance on that journey to think about, what is their purpose going to continue to be? And I think that some people have trouble finding that purpose, actually. And have you found that?
I wrote the book to speak to as many people, to reach as broad an audience as I could. So some people are all about finding their purpose in life, and some people are all about figuring out the financial side of it.
Mhm.
And some people are all about the legal side of it. So there's a dose of just about everything in there, and a lot of resources for pursuing it further.
Oh, well, that's great. So Jay, how do people find you, or how would people think about, when do they think about it? That would be my question. When do they really start to think about it, and when should they think about it? I mean, I have my own ideas that would be an answer to that question, but I'm curious and interested to hear what you say, and I'm sure other people would like to hear that too.
So in the US in general, about 30% of people have estate plans in place. And that's nobody. I mean, like, it's a very, very small percentage. And the number one reason they get it done is because they have kids. Like, hey, who's going to take my kids if something happens to me? So for our folks, that just doesn't happen. And when we look at the child-free population, Sarah and I are finishing a study looking at that, and we're finding that about 20% of child-free folks have a will in place. So it's an even smaller percentage. And when people ask me, like, when should I do it? I'm like, now. And the reason is you could be 20 and get hit by the bus and not have the paperwork in place and have the same problem.
Right.
And people think about it like, oh, it's death and dying when I'm old.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, but so much happens in between now and then. I mean, I had a client who in his mid 50s had a stroke. A lawyer, doing fine, all of a sudden had a stroke, and next thing you know, he's disabled and his wife's taking care of him. If they didn't have the paperwork in place, it'd be a nightmare, because she has to be his power of attorney, work through all that. Like, you need to be able to protect yourself. And it doesn't cost a lot of money to do that. I mean, if you really, just want to get something done simple, there's a company called freewill.com. You can get the paperwork done for free. But you need to have a plan. And to Sarah's point about purpose, one of the questions we get into is like, well, what is your legacy? What do you want your impact to be?
Right.
For child-free people, the question I often ask is, what's the second line of your obituary say? So the first line's like, Jay died at this age, this location. And the second line is usually like, father 3 leaves behind Jack, Joe, and John. That's not us. So what do you want that impact to be? What do you want it to be? And it doesn't have to be something huge. You don't have to, cure cancer.
Right.
But I had a client, she said her purpose in life and kind of what she wanted to do and be known for is she wanted to have the best garden. She wanted to have the garden where the butterflies come by and everybody in the neighborhood stops, checks out the butterflies and the flowers, and goes on. That can be your purpose in life, but then we need to make sure your money, your plan, everything else goes towards that purpose.
Right. So Charlotte says, how do you prevent social isolation and loneliness when an ager has and is healthy but is reclusive? Good question.
Well, I'll tackle that because I'm probably more on the social side of things. If Charlotte is talking about preventing social isolation for someone else, she can't. People just make their own decisions about where they're going to live, and you can help educate them about the pitfalls of living 10 miles out of the nearest town or from the nearest neighbor. But most people think that at whatever age they are now, maybe they're 60 or 63, and they think, well, I feel great, and they project that into their future, so that when they think when they're 90, they're going to feel the same way. And it's hard for people to put their 60-year-old self into their 90-year-old shoes.
What a great point.
All I do is I help people see alternatives. And a great deal of my book is actually devoted to the alternatives for where to live. Because in my opinion, it's all about where you live. Building and maintaining community is about where you live. So making that decision is one of the biggest ones that is in front of all of us.
You know, it's interesting that because Jay, as you're saying that, I'm guilty. I don't have anything in place. My daughter has been on me for years to do this, especially the industry that I've worked in. I mean, it's even worse that I don't because of what I see. You know, I would see every day. So it's even actually. It's beyond ridiculous. It's almost shameful. I'm being honest, right? But I think that what you just said, Sarah, really hit me because I can't see at 72, I can't really see my 90-year-old self. So you have to plan for that because exactly what you're thinking. I don't think I'm going to feel any different, but in all likelihood, I will. Right?
You will, yeah.
So, Louis,
and if I can, Phyllis, if I can join in,
sure.
So I'm the resident introvert in this group. You know, Sarah is much more outgoing than I am, and I always love looking at the community stuff. And people go, "Well, what if they are an introvert?" Or because like there's still ways to have community. It's just going to be, in particular for introverts, a smaller, tight knit community. You know, I'm not one of those going to have a high quantity of friends, but I'm going to have quality friends.
Right.
You know, and there's also growing groups, you know, online, you know, video game groups, whatever it might be. Everybody has a different definition of community. The key is to what Sarah's saying is to build that now, not when you're in need. You know, there was an old book called "Dig Your Well Before You're Thirsty." Like that's a concept.
Right. So Lewis says living alone increases the risk of physical dangers going unnoticed, such as falls, malnutrition. I'm concerned about my dad, who is 87. Suggestions. Wow, that's a good one. So I'm just going to weigh in on that because I have thought about that myself. I have to be honest. You know, I have, you know, it's stairs going to the garage, but stairs going upstairs to the bedroom. And there have been days when I thought, God, if I fell, who would know? There's, you know, I mean, I don't have that life alert thing. I say, should I get one? Oh, I don't see my 72 age self getting that. You know, that's for, I mean, and I'm just as guilty and I'm in this space, right? I think about that. So that's a great question. You want to weigh in on that, either one of you?
I really have the same answer I did for Charlotte. And that's, well, both of these people are asking about others, not themselves. Right. And you can't force anyone to do anything. So I think you can maybe, in some cases, maybe in Louis' case, you can do some educating. You can kind of on the sly replace some of those loose rugs or whatever it is that you're seeing as the fall danger. You can maybe have a hand in what your father eats. But, you know, everybody's different. How much of a hand you can have in that, I don't know. And at some point, I agree. We do need to let people be who they are.
Yeah, I agree. But I agree. But I'm going to make a suggestion also. Sometimes it's helpful to bring in an outside party because it's difficult to have those conversations depending on what the dynamic of that relationship has been. So it could be a doctor, it could be a family friend, a trusted advisor, it could be a clergy person. Sometimes an outside voice can be more helpful in that dynamic and in creating that conversation than between those two people. What would you say about that, Jay?
So in my book, we have a whole chapter as part of people's financial plan that says what is your plan for your parents? Which sounds a little weird to ask child-free people about planning parents, but we're talking about their parents. It's not like them planning to be a parent. And it's about having that conversation early. And you're right, you're going to probably have to bring in a third party and possibly some technology. There's Apple fall detection. There's a bunch of things you can do there. I love aging care managers help. And the one thing I like to remind people of, in coaching, there's a general rule that says you can't coach somebody who you've seen naked or they've seen you naked. So that means you can't coach your parents, you can't coach your spouse, you can't coach your kids. Like, it's just true. Like, you're not a king in your own kingdom. So you bring in somebody from the outside, you might have a chance. Now, I'm also with Sarah. There is limits where you have to be able to, as part of your plan for your parents, set limits and say, Dad, I'm trying to help you. This is what we're trying to do. I brought in somebody to give us an opinion. And if Dad says, well, tough luck. And I don't know about you, but some of us have some of those parents, and I have one of those. Okay, well then you do you. Like,
right. I can't help it. Right, exactly.
Me and my mother have this conversation all the time. She's like, I'm hurting. I'm like, go to the doctor. She goes, well, I don't want to. I'm like, well, then why are you calling me?
So I fall in that space because my daughter was saying, why didn't you go to a doctor? What's wrong with you? I mean, I say, well, I've worked in the industry. I'm not so crazy about doctors. I'm not going to. She said, okay, so then whatever. Don't tell me. I mean, it's really just what you just said. It's funny and it's not. But I've done presentations on caregiving conversations because, because of the dynamic, those are very difficult conversations to have very often. And there are ways that, maybe strategies or ways to go about it that people don't ordinarily think about because of the dynamic, and they just go at it, just head on. Right. I'm thinking about an episode of, so I've said this before. I like cop shows and mysteries and all those kind of things, law shows. And so one of them I've been watching is Blue Bloods. And there was an episode from, I think it was 2012, but I'm not 100% sure because I have written down some of the episodes in the years, but this is how far back this goes. And it was about the father and the fact that he was getting into a lot of car accidents and they wanted to take away the key. His son wanted to take away the keys, and it created a big fight, and they stopped talking to each other and yada, 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 and I'm sure many people either listening or watching have had that experience or know somebody that did. And finally, it was the older daughter, the only daughter they had, who kind of brought them together and helped solve the issue. But it was, it's a very delicate conversation, and people get defensive, and they don't want to think as, they've been the parent, and they don't want to think that now their adult child is now telling them what to do or showing them where they're failing when they were the person who was responsible for that person's well-being. It's, it's a very tricky situation. Wouldn't you say?
It is. And I think the challenge is we all want the best for our parents. We all want the best for each other. And it's just hard. The role reversals, all that fun stuff that's there. That's why I made my joke about coaching them. It just doesn't happen. And let's be real. No one in this room wants to be a burden on other people. You hear that a lot. I don't want to be a burden. Okay, great. Then the way you're not a burden on your family is you make a plan. The joke is, the only reason you don't make a will is if you hate your family, because then they can fight over it. You make a plan, they can follow it. You can bring in professionals to help you if you have the resources. There are ways to do it.
I think we froze. I think Jay froze. Oops, I think we lost. Oh, we lost you for a second there, Jay. It happens.
Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Happens. Yeah. Technology.
So, I recently had a family member who passed away, and I'm a certified financial planner. I do this stuff day in, day out. It took me 3 full days to find his paperwork, what he wanted, what his wish, like even was he going to get buried? It took 3 days because they never talked about it. There's a thing called a knock box, next of kin box. You can set up, put all the paperwork. And if you can talk to your your family members, if you can talk to each other, you can set a plan. You got family members across the country, you set a plan for who takes turns doing what. You can also set a plan for what money do you use. Like people go, well, I can't, spend money on care because I need it for XYZ. Well, that's your money. If you need it for care, spend it. Like, it's about finding a balance and setting a plan and following it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. When I work with people, I tell them, get your papers together, put them in have a discussion. Even if it's, I think there was something that I came across once. It was called a life care directory, and go through it. Even if everybody has to kind of know what the situation is. So in that same show, there was another episode where the father has a heart attack and the son comes to the, to the hospital, and the nurse says, well, we need to know what medications he's on. He says, I don't know. Mm-hmm. And obviously that's important information for people to have. So Lionel says, I am facing the challenge of making detailed plans for my estate and end of life wishes without a spouse or close family to help. What should I do?
Yeah, in that case, there's kind of two paths, from a legal standpoint. We serve folks who have no living biological or adopted children, because there's a difference. If you have children and, you're disenfranchised, other things, there are legal issues around kind of writing somebody out of your will or how you write the paperwork. But I'm going to talk about it as if you don't have kids, because there's no way to know. I think the challenge is just get started. So, in our system, the first thing we do is create your legal documents, the will, power of attorney, all that. But then it gets to that point Phyllis was just making, like, what are your medical issues? We call them our medical care documents. Are you allergic to medications? What do we need to know? What medications are you on? What are your medical issues? Because if you have an emergency, in our time, we actually serve as your medical power of attorney, and we need to know all that. If you're having somebody else do that, that's fine too. They need to have all that information. So you need to start with, all right, I got to get my paperwork done. That's your will, medical power of attorney, financial power of attorney, and a trust, depending on your situation. And then you have to have the backup documents to do it. What happens is too many people stop because they're like overwhelmed. I'm like, just get a first set of documents done. You can update them anytime. You can like make a whole new one. If you like make a mistake, whatever, you can just restart. But you don't want to be sitting here a year from now and, you fall and break a hip and you don't have the paperwork in place.
Interesting. So when I, speak or, with families or do any kind of presentation, what I say is to be informed is being forewarned. And so what I tell people is if you have an older parent or a loved one, in all likelihood, not always, but a good percentage of the time, you're going to get that dreaded phone call that they fell or had a stroke or a heart attack, some situation that landed them in the hospital, right? And it's just what you say. That's not the time to either make a decision about where they're going to go if they need rehab. When you're in stress, you can't make informed decisions, right? And very often a hospital will say, well, we're discharging them in 3 days. Where are they going, right? So it's the same thing about what you say, what medications are they on? What do they have do they have dentures? Do they have hearing aids? Do they have, all of these things really, I'm thinking of as I'm speaking, when, well, as a person who has had children, when it's about, I'd say, was it about 8 months? When I was about 8 months pregnant, they tell you, maybe it was before, but I don't 100% remember. It was so long ago. Get your bag ready. Have your suitcase ready, because when that time comes, you just want to be able to take that suitcase and go to the hospital. And so it's really kind of the same scenario. Have everything ready. So God forbid if that does happen. What I tell people, and tell me what you think about this. What I tell people is, you think you're not planning for these kind of situations, calamities, or you don't want to think about it. But the reality is you do plan for these things, because if you're a driver, you have car insurance. You're not planning on being in a car accident, but it can happen. And you want to make sure you're protected and everything is in place if it, God forbid, does happen. Same thing with medical insurance. So would you say this is kind of the same thing?
So here's what I would say. If you do not make a plan, the government has made a plan for you. Because there are quote unquote safety nets, for if you're child free and you have next of kin appointed, then the court steps in or the healthcare organizations. But that is not the plan you want.
Right.
And that's the challenge. And I think the hard part is it's like when I was like to get started, we work with our financial planning clients on this plan for parents. And I think of this couple, we were working on a plan for their mother, and their mother was very reluctant to get the paperwork done. And I get this panicked email, hey, can we meet today? And I'm like, what happened? And she's like, my mom fell, broke her leg, and now I'm trying to figure out what to do. And I'll never forget, because this client of ours, who was her daughter, is in her mother's bathroom, huddled up, crying, trying to figure out how to take care of her mother. Now, mind you, my client was a nurse and still going, how do I do this?
Right.
And I'm like, that's the problem.
Right.
If you don't, it's a whole, if you don't make a plan, you're planning to fail.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And it's true. Also, it's funny that you say that, she was a nurse, because as we all know, that just because you have an expertise in that area, when you're in that situation, it becomes a very different thing. It's like a doctor who's the worst patient, right? Has nothing to do with what your experience or your background. When you're in that situation, it's a very different scenario, right? So, yeah. So how do people find you, Jay, or what do they do? Or are there other people who do what you do, actually, who serve people in this capacity?
Yeah. In California and Arizona, you can appoint a professional fiduciary to do this. They have a great system in California. It's one of the few that is well developed. It's actually the only licensed system out there to do that. If you're in the other states, it's a little bit harder. Our website is childfreetrust.com. You can take a look at that and we can get you in there if you are child free. Even if you're not, you need to work on a plan, right. And that's where the challenge is. You just need to get started. I always joke, and everybody listening can do this. Go to your family member, go to your spouse, go to whoever you got to push to make a plan and say, Dr. J says, I have to do this. Like, hey, I was talking to this guy and he says, I got to do this. Just blame me. Seriously, it's fine as long as you get started.
Right. So, and then I have a question for Sarah. Oh, well, so Caroline says, I'm a solo ager. I'm trying to research and when the time comes to secure professional in-home care, or instead transition to an assisted living facility when the need arises. How do I know when to make an assisted living or nursing home decision? Oh, very good question.
Good question. And it really is the question of the hour. When people get up into their late 70s, into their mid 80s, even late 80s, many people are still saying, well, I think I need to make a move, but I just don't know when. I just don't know where. Well, my strong guidance, especially for solo agers, is get out and do the research. Mm-hmm. Get out and look at the varying options around you. There's all kinds of senior living communities. There's continuing care communities, and there's month-to-month communities, and there's the kind where you have to put a hefty down payment and others where you don't. And there are assisted living communities, and sometimes they're combined with independent living. They're just, they're all different one from another. So familiarize yourself with what's around you. Because frankly, most people, when push comes to shove, want to go somewhere that's pretty close to where the home that they know, the town that they know. They still know where to shop. They still know their doctors are there. It's familiarity thing.
I'm sorry, no, go ahead, because I wanted to comment on it, but you go ahead, finish. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
The last thing you want to be doing is making that decision in a crisis.
Correct.
So I tell people that even to research the skilled nursing facilities around them, because if the time should come when you hurt yourself and you don't have anyone at home to help you rehabilitate, you're going to have to go to skilled nursing. And it's so helpful to be able to say to the hospital, I want to go here.
Yep.
Right. So what I tell people is to plan by choice, because you can't plan when you're in a crisis.
Yeah. It's a
And
terrible time
in
to plan.
and it's in terms of the nursing home space or skilled nursing, which is what I was saying earlier. If you get that phone call, let's say, if you have an older parent, a loved one, it's really important. What I tell people is start to look at the 5 places, let's say, around where you think you would go if you needed even short-term rehab. Is it going to be near you or near somebody that's a friend or a relative or a family member, and really do your research. But there's a lot to it, more than meets the eye, because I come from that space, right? Because you can go, if you're in a hospital, and say, hey, listen, these are 5 places that I'm considering if I need to go for rehab. These are the 5 places that I'd like for you to see if there's a bed available for me. Because otherwise, I've been in situations, people have called me and say, they gave me a list of 20 places and I don't even know where to start. Well,
Yeah,
first of all,
right.
I tell people, don't look at a brochure, because the brochure, it could be great pictures and it's a brochure and it's for marketing purposes. And Caroline says, that's my problem. I'm healthy until I have a crisis. And that's all of us, right? I tell this story. Many years ago, I was working at a facility about an hour and a half from me. It was actually in New Jersey, in Staten Island, actually. And I had just started working there, and I parked my car in the street, and it was like a couple of weeks before Christmas, so it got dark early, and it had been raining, and I ran out to get into my car, right? Because I wanted to hurry up and get home, and I was rushing. It was late, and I stepped off the curb and stepped into what I thought was a puddle. Unfortunately, it was a hole that was covered with water, and I fell and I sprained my ankle. So I always tell that story, because until I stepped into that hole, I was fine. And it's exactly what Caroline is just saying. We don't know when that's going to happen. And so that's why I say plan by choice, because you can't plan when you're in a crisis. So you might as well do this investigation beforehand. And a lot of people don't want to, because it seems like it's an unpleasant, especially thinking about skilled nursing or nursing homes or financial planning, estate planning. So how do you guys do that if you're working with somebody? How do you coach them through those feelings?
So I'll pick up on this. My rule is you are not ready to retire until you have a plan in place for long-term care. Like, how are you going to pay for it? What is it going to be? And people are like, whoa, I'm too young for that. I'm like, my actual goal is for people at their mid 40s to put money aside for long-term care, because it's super expensive for good care. And this is one of those where the money you have matters, in the level of care you get. I just have to be honest of that. And the hard part is people are like, well, I want to enjoy my retirement. I'm like, great. After you make your plan, you can go enjoy your retirement. And that's where I encourage people to work with like aging care managers, or a lot of times in your area, either in the city or county, there are social workers at the areas on aging and other programs that can help you through this. There are also aging care managers, geriatric care managers, depending on what they want to call them, case managers, other things that you can hire essentially to work like a real estate agent for you. Like, tell you what are the good, bad facilities in the area. They know all the inside and out. They can get to know you. They can help you make a plan. And then you take that plan and you put it on a shelf if you don't need it. But I've also had some folks, they said, okay, I want to go in like a CCRC. And I had a couple that looked at it, great facility, loved it. They could afford it. It was a 10-year wait list.
Oh my God.
And that's not uncommon.
No, it's not uncommon, actually.
It's
not
getting more common
places.
all the time.
Right. Yeah. Not for some of the better places, right? Yeah.
And so I have another client who's been on one of those 10-year wait lists. She's not the top of the list. They call her every year, go, hey, do you want in? She goes, no, not this year. Okay. And they just keep her at the top of the list. Right. And she had to pay some money to be on the list, but she knows where she's going. And it's one of the top beautiful, beautiful facilities, well-run, financially well-run. But if you have to do this in emergency, you're taking the next available bed.
Correct.
And I was a paramedic for years, and people that want to rely on Medicaid, and some people that's their only choice, but Medicaid care is not always the best. Those facilities are not always the best. The next available bed. I mean, there are some facilities that I would not let a family member or friend go in. I wouldn't. And it's not because the people there don't have a good heart, but just there's something wrong there. But if you have no plan and you don't have a space and you don't have a way to handle it, that's where you're going. Because I don't know about you, but my luck is the only bed available for me if I don't make a plan is going to be in the facility that's the worst down the street.
So it's interesting you say that because several years ago, my daughter called me about a friend of hers whose father wound up with cancer. And he had radiation, and he had a trach, and he had feeding tube, whatever. So he had to leave the hospital and go someplace for rehab. So my daughter called me and asked me if I would talk to the gal, and I said, yeah, of course. And so I asked her a lot of questions, whatever. But when I started the conversation, I said to her, I will not tell you where not to go. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that a place is bad or whatever. I will give you the best advice I can. I'll arm you with information. You could go do your own research. I'll tell you what to look for, what questions to ask, what answers you should get based on his condition. So she said, okay. And then she said to me, oh, but the social worker in the hospital suggested XYZ place. So I said to her, remember I told you at the beginning that I wouldn't tell you not to go someplace? She said, yes. I said, don't go to that place. I'm just saying, based on his condition, I know that place. I would not suggest you go to that place. So it's just kind of what you said, Jay, because I'm sure they had, not that anybody has nefarious intentions, but they have relationships, and that place maybe had some empty beds, and they, it's just the way it goes.
I had somebody who asked me, hey, why would that social worker recommend that place if it's not a good place? And I said, you have to remember, it's just kind of like he who pays the piper calls the tune.
Right.
Whoever is paying that social worker kind of is the one they're working for. So the social worker for the hospital is there to free up beds. Make sure you get, you're safe and free up beds. To them, getting you in a facility that makes you safe and off their list. It's not that they don't care, but they have 1,000 other patients they have to figure out. And if they can get you in a bed, that's a success. Right. And there are some times a year or random things where that might be the only bed.
Right.
And to them, they're going, well, what else you want to do? And people say, well, I want to stay in the hospital until I find a better place. That's not an option.
Right. I mean, I'm not laughing because it's funny. I mean, it's not an option because the hospital is going to say, I'm sorry, but it's time for you to go. I mean, interestingly enough, my ex-husband, my daughter had been helping him out for quite a number of years, and he was clearly declining cognitively, and he was living in a residence for, adults. Right. And it was getting really, really bad. And she would tell me, and I'd say, I think you should start to look for some places. She wasn't ready to do that. And then something happened, and they called Adult Protective Services, and he was in the hospital. And she gave up his apartment. He clearly couldn't stay there. There were fires, the whole, that was happening. And so she said, well, what am I going to do? The hospital says they're going to discharge him. I mean, they'll send him to a homeless shelter. I said, well, but I suggested that you look into these places beforehand. And she said, well, what will I do now? But thankfully, because I have relationships in the industry, I was able to call somebody and they were able to help out. But not everybody, has that as an option. But there's a perfect example. And I'm in this space, and my daughter, she just didn't do that. People think, well, I'll do it when the time comes. So Carlton is saying you're talking about people who have the income and assets to put money aside for long-term care, etc. I don't have that money. I have had marginal lifetime income. Don't I count too? What do you suggest for me? I'm a financially poor 72-year-old solo ager dependent on Social Security.
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
I'll take that. Carlton, what you should do is go down to your county office on aging and put your name on the list for senior housing. You will, from what you're saying, it sounds like you will qualify for Medicaid, and they will pick up the slack that Medicare won't pay for. There are some things obviously that doesn't cover, but what you really need is that senior subsidized housing. And I don't know where you live, but if there's a PACE program anywhere near you, that is also a terrific thing for people without a lot of means.
Yeah,
So
PACE is terrific.
Go to your county area agency on aging or your council on aging. They're called different things in different states and different counties, but it's all money that was designated many years ago in the Older Americans Act. So if we don't get that taken away, there's help for you out there, but start there.
And I just want to say, he said, don't I count too? You absolutely do.
Of course.
Right. So I mean, this has been absolutely terrific. I mean, your insights, your knowledge, I mean, this is important information that people need. And I'm so glad. I know you guys are exhausted, and I'm so thankful that you were able to really spend the time with me tonight anyway. And, it was terrific, because I'm sure people just receive so much valuable information. And if you want to, Sara, just if you want to say how people can contact you or where they can find your book again, and the same for you, Jay, that would be great.
Well, my website is just like my name, sarazeffgeber.com.
Cool. You want to spell it for people?
Oh, it's not on their screen like it is on mine.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Well, your name is on the screen, but
that's all they need. That's all
okay, great. All right. And Jay?
Yeah, so we're at childfreetrust.com. The book, The Child Free Guide to Life and Money, in stores everywhere. I think the hardest part to this is just getting started. And what you can find is books like Sara's and mine, for those who don't have the resources, can at least give you a little bit of a guidebook. But the key is, you've heard a message from us talking about this. The key is, do you actually make a change tomorrow? Make a plan. That's what are you going to take for the next step tomorrow, rather than I'll get around to it.
Right. Because as we know, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the next best time is now. So I think that's a great way to end it. So thanks so much, guys. I really appreciate it. It was really terrific. And I learned a lot myself, and I think I have to do some things tomorrow also.
Yeah, you got to get your paperwork done, Phyllis. Yeah, I know I've got your phone number. I'm going to text you and make sure you get your paperwork.
I think I'm going to be calling you, Jay. Otherwise, you're going to be calling me. So, absolutely. So now for next week's show, I'm proud to have as my guest my friend, Dame Clarissa Burt. Clarissa Burt is an internationally acclaimed, award-winning media personality, producer, director, writer, author, public speaker, former supermodel, and winner of the Celebrity Survivor show. With hundreds of television and film credits to her name, this who's who of international and American women brings over 40 years of entertainment industry experience in both international and American markets. Her internationally acclaimed, award-winning, best-selling book entitled The Self-Esteem Regime has been on the shelves in Barnes & Noble stores nationally, Amazon, Audible, and Kindle for 5 years. Clarissa was the first American to present Russian TV at the Kremlin, has had 2 private audiences with Pope John Paul II, honoring her extensive social work. As the ambassador to the United States, she actively helped African women win the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011. So remember to tune in, comment, and ask questions on Wednesday, November 12th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the Source TV Radio Network. And until then, take care, stay well, and stay tuned.
I'm just saying I'm not finished yet. Search for it, swing for it, discover the me that lives in yes. Stand for it, stretch for it. It's my time, imagine my best. Run for it, reach for it, uncover the me that lives in yes. I know, yes I know, there'll be miracles where